Alright, good afternoon, YouTube. I thought I'd make a video talking about GABA and its very important role within the body, and also talking about some of the medications that affect GABA and why GABA, or the medications that affect it, which I'll go into, are actually so pernicious for your health and are very detrimental to your memory. So, in order to talk about the GABAergic system, we need to begin with the basics, the fundamentals of it. Now, GABA begins with the base amino acid known as glutamic acid, or glutamate. Yeah, so this is glutamic acid. And we also have, from this, is made the other neurotransmitter, glutamate, and GABA. Now, I'm not going to talk about glutamate, but after this video, I probably should make a video talking about the glutamatergic system, as it's basically the opposite of the GABAergic system. Whereas the GABAergic system is basically known for being inhibitory. I should probably provide some further discussion on this for people who aren't very familiar with it. GABA is basically the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, and it deals mostly with calming your brain down in a very direct fashion. What it does is it actually binds to neurons that have the GABA receptor on it, and it hyperpolarizes it, which makes it so that it action potential cannot cross that neuron, and it's just stopped. And so it actually literally just directly lowers the activity within your brain, which is what gives it that very anxiolytic effect. It is a very potent drug, potent neurotransmitter in preventing seizures and anxiety attacks. And this is why GABAergic drugs such as barbiturates, which are kind of now out of practice, and now benzodiazepines, are used to actually prevent seizures, which is pretty interesting. And I'm going to end up going into that in the video. Please do be patient. Now, getting back into the chemistry of things, this is glutamate. As we see, it is it's an amino acid. And here we are having, this is not an amino acid. This is, this is the amino acid. And so this is GAD, which is basically glutamate amino decarboxylase. And what it does is it basically removes the carboxyl group, so the COOH, and in an intramolecular substitution reaction, it removes this amino group and it just puts it off onto the gamma position. And now, I didn't learn this until very recently, but I knew that GABA stood for gamma aminobutyric acid, but I didn't actually understand the IUPAC nomenclature of this. However, I now do, and I'll explain that to you guys. What this is, butyric acid. Bu is basically a chemistry naming system for how many carbon chains there are. So we start off with meth, eth, prop, bute. And so you've all heard of methane, ethane, propane, butane. Butane is basically just a four-membered carbon hydrocarbon. But this is also in relation to how many carbons are in a chain. So there's 1 carbon, 2 carbon, 3 carbon, 4 carbon. You could call this, some people may make the mistake of calling it 6. However, one must pay attention to the groups that are here. This is OH and this is NH2. Those are not carbons, so they do not contribute to the chain. So in reality, there's only 4 carbons in a single uninterrupted chain. So that's where the butyric acid comes from. The acid part comes from the fact that on this carboxyl group, this can donate hydrogen, which is the definition of an acid, anything that can donate a hydrogen group. And gamma basically relates to it being at the gamma position. So at the alpha carbon, we have, so basically the first carbon is alpha carbon, then we have the beta carbon, and then we have the gamma carbon. And so gamma is related to the functional groups that hang off of certain carbons. So if I had that let me actually show you guys again. If I had this NH2 at the alpha position on this first carbon, I would actually end up calling it alpha aminobutyric acid or beta aminobutyric acid. However, because it's at the gamma position, that's where the whole gamma name comes from, which is pretty interesting. I think it'd be cool to note that and actually understand where the naming convention comes from. And so, let me get the camera back in. And so I tried making a pretty good representative model of a GABA receptor on the membrane of the neuron. And these are the two subtypes of the GABA receptor I'm going to talk about, the alpha and the beta subtypes within the gamma neuron. And what GABA does is it's just going to, I'm going to go to this model, which is I think on the sagittal plane. And what it's going to do is it's going to, I'm just going to draw GABA here. GABA. And it's going to bind to this, to a receptor within the GABA receptor. Yeah, so GABA, I'm repeating myself. GABA is going to bind to the GABA receptor. And what it's going to do is it's going to take this extracellular, chloride ions, which are negatively charged. They are, I think, anions? Yeah. And it's going to open up this, this pore, basically. Typically, this pore is closed, but it's going to open up this pore, and it's going to allow chloride ions to enter inside the cell. And so now I have another demonstration here where there are chloride ions within the cell, and that's after GABA has let them in. Now, that's the typical function of how GABA works. That's what it does. Is it allows chloride ions inside of the cell, and by doing that, it hyperpolarizes it, basically making it so an action potential can't travel across the neuron, thus producing an inhibitory effect on the brain. Glutamate does the very opposite thing. To be honest, I'm probably going to make another video about glutamate to explain that. Glutamate's honestly very interesting in that it's very important when it comes to learning and memory, specifically the NMDA receptor. And it's actually great as it can be leveraged to enhance memory. And I shouldn't go into that right now, but I'm going to publish another video on this. So let me get back in the video. Yeah, so now getting into the medications that affect GABA, some of the drugs that affect GABA, the GABAergic system, are ethanol, so alcohol, barbiturates, which are kind of now out of favor, and benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines, I probably should have gone into the chemical structure of benzodiazepines. Frankly, though, it can be searched up in a YouTube video or just a Wikipedia search of the chemical structure of benzodiazepines. But however, what they do is they bind to either the alpha or the beta subtype. Alcohol can actually only bind to the alpha subtype of the GABA receptor. However, benzodiazepines are very effective in that they actually have their own little receptor slot. So I'm just going to draw a little receptor slot here. This is the benz receptor. I'm just going to call it that. So now what happens under the influence of benzodiazepines, such as, let me go into this, such as Ativan, Xanax is very common, alprazolam, loraprazolam. What they do, those are just common trade names, common names, is that they bind to this receptor, and they are what's known as a positive allosteric modulator. So I'm just going to write it down here. Positive allosteric modulator. This is something typically known as within biology, is a lot of things will positively allosterically modulate certain things. Oh, I forgot to add, marijuana, weed, THC is also a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor, which is why some users report in anecdotal experiences of having a very sleep-inducing effect. That's because it positively allosterically modulates this. What that means is that allosteric means just from another area. So instead of directly acting upon it, from another place, it modulates it, and it basically changes it in a positive fashion. So it up-regulates it. And what this does is when, let's say, you take Xanax, that you are prescribed, of course, that it's going to bind to this benzodiazepine receptor, and it's going to potentiate the effect of GABA by lowering its KD, which is the dissociation constant. So GABA, if we didn't have GABA that dissociated from its receptor, we would just be in a state where our brain is constantly inhibited. We would never learn anything, and we would kind of just have very low levels of activity within our brain, which is not good. And so we actually have it so that GABA will eventually dissociate from its receptor and get cleaved off. But benzodiazepines, as I said, lower the KD value of this. This is not exactly clearly illustrated in the literature how it does this, but all we need to know is that it does this. It positively allosterically modulates this GABA by lowering its KD. Not kill-death ratio, just dissociation constant. And what that means is that it can allow the GABA that's currently tonically there floating around to let in more and more and more chloride ions. But that's actually at the alpha subtype that I've already discussed. That's called the ionotropic subtype. What that does is basically it just lets in ions. And now it also has effects on the beta subtype. That's something ethanol doesn't, which is why Xanax and things like that, any benzodiazepines, are much more effective at preventing anxiety than alcohol. While alcohol is a great anxiolytic drug for some people, it's not the best. Now, the beta subtype is the metabotropic subtype. What that does is it actually works in a different action where it affects the protein pump, the potassium pump within the cell, and what it does is it pumps out, when benzodiazepine affects this beta subtype as well, is it will pump out potassium ions outside the cell. And so now if you see that potassium ions, they are cations. Cations are positively charged. And so this is just going to further hyperpolarize the membrane potential of the cell here, and it's not going to allow the action potential to pass through, basically further inhibiting your brain. So it acts on two different ways. From the beta subtype, which is metabotropic, I'm just going to write that down, metabotropic, just, for spelling or whatever, and ionotropic. It's going to act on these two subtypes to induce its effects. And like I said, it doesn't directly cause this pore to open for chloride ions to enter. It just potentiates the effect of the neurotransmitter that's currently there. Now, getting into some discussion of why benzodiazepines are so pernicious and why overactivation of the GABAergic system is actually pretty detrimental to your memory. Now, benzodiazepines are a controlled substance. They're a drug of abuse. I don't condone the usage of them. I'm not a physician. I'm simply a college student. But they are pernicious is because the reason why they are pernicious is because they are exceptionally good at activating the GABA-A subtype. The GABA-A subtype has a very important role with memory. Memory is something that we all want to optimize. It's something that is essential to us as humans living. And so when you agonize that to a great extent, to superphysiological levels, you are going to have amnesia, retrograde amnesia from this, which is going to make it so that whatever you're doing while you are on this medication, you will not remember it. It will be very difficult for you to remember it, and it will make it so that future things that come after using this, it will also make it so that you cannot remember them. So firstly, it impacts your memory system and is very deleterious to you. The reason why it's so pernicious, though, is because when using them, your body will very quickly develop a tolerance to it. Even quicker than, I wouldn't say caffeine, but even quicker than something like, actually can't think of any drugs at the top of my head, but it will develop a tolerance to it very quickly. The reason why this tolerance is so bad is because GABA and glutamate, these are two opposite neurotransmitters within the brain. One of them is the excitatory neurotransmitter, one of them is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. They're very important within the brain. And when you are causing a downregulation of one of the receptors, the inhibitory receptor, you are kind of going to set yourself up for experiences of mania, anxiety attacks, and a lot of other issues that will come from having a lack of inhibition. And this is exactly what we see. Now, people that are on Xanax will develop tolerance, and they can end up taking more and more, which will further worsen their condition. But when that drug is suddenly removed, they will undergo extreme panic attacks, extreme mania, and it will be horrible for their health. The withdrawals are, in fact, almost worse than opioids, from what I've heard, from anecdotal experiences and from reports on the web, that the withdrawals are horrible. In addition, because the GABAergic and the glutamatergic system are very hand-in-hand when it comes to neuroplasticity, this drug is very deleterious for elderly people, as they have low levels of neuroplasticity within their brain, and their brain is very sensitive to rapid, sudden changes in the levels and balance of neurotransmitters. And so old people or geriatric patients should practice extreme caution when using these, and I'm sure doctors already do when prescribing such drugs. I don't want to make this video too long. It's already about 15 minutes. Thank you guys for tuning in to watching this video. This is going to be one of many other videos that are going to be related to pharmacology on this channel. I hope you guys enjoyed. Goodbye.